Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely change how you look at CAPTCHA automation in Bubble.io. We're taking it from what honestly usually feels like a fragile, totally unpredictable API call and turning it into a rock-solid, observable production workflow. Whether you're an agency scaling client ops, a no-code builder, or a technical operator, this checklist is definitely going to save you a ton of late-night debugging.
Okay, let's be real for a second. If you've ever built one of these integrations, you know exactly how this goes. You ship the integration for that very first test in a nice, clean browser environment. The API works beautifully, a token comes back, the workflow continues, and you're thinking, awesome, we're ready. But then comes production reality. The workflow runs inside a scheduled backend job, and suddenly, the token gets rejected by the target server. Your retry logic starts firing out of control, and honestly, the worst part, it's a silent failure. The Bubble workflow might actually tell you the API call succeeded, but the downstream process, it totally failed.
So, to conquer this, we're going to walk through a 5-part checklist: the happy path illusion, start with authorization, mapping the chain, perfecting inputs and sessions, and finally, measuring true success.
Part 1. The happy path illusion. Why the deceptively simple demo is actually a trap.
Now this quote hits the nail right on the head. The Bubble workflow says the API call succeeded, but the full process still fails. You see, connecting an API just isn't the same thing as workflow design. A CAPTCHA solver can perfectly solve the challenge, hand you a shiny new valid token, but if your downstream systems just silently reject that token because of a mismatched environment or, say, an expired session, well, your automation is broken.
So, the absolutely crucial question for all of us builders becomes, how do we actually build a workflow that survives outside of our neat, perfectly clean testing environment?
Moving on to Part 2. Start with authorization. Establish the safe scope before building.
Okay, before you write a single line of logic in Bubble, you've really got to step back and ask yourself a few things. Is this your own app? Is it a client-authorized workflow? Is it approved for QA or testing? And are third-party terms actually being respected? You really should only use these workflows in owned, client-authorized, or contractually permitted environments. Because honestly, a technically functional workflow is still completely inappropriate if it's used outside of a permitted context.
All right, Part 3, mapping the full chain. Do not start with the CAPTCHA API call.
Instead, you need to map out your architecture step by step. Step 1, trigger the backend workflow. Step 2, identify exactly where the CAPTCHA challenge appears. Step 3, figure out what data the workflow needs to collect. Step 4, submit and poll for the solve. And Step 5, confirm that the downstream success actually happened. By mapping these precise steps, you stop treating the CAPTCHA solve as this isolated little task, and you start treating it as a holistic chain where every single link really matters.
Part 4. Perfecting inputs and sessions. Sending only what is needed exactly where it is needed.
This next concept, it literally solves the most common reason these workflows fail: stale or incorrect inputs. Before sending a request to the solver, you must inspect the live network call. You only want to capture the exact parameters the CAPTCHA family expects. So, the CAPTCHA type, the site key, page URL, action value, and any required proxy or session fields. Storing unnecessary Bubble page data is just going to create totally false debugging paths for you later on. Keep it lean and keep it exact. Now, this brings us to a huge concept: session continuity. Basically, this means applying a solved token in the exact same browser context, cookie jar, user agent, and request state that triggered the initial challenge. This is exactly where so many scheduled Bubble workflows completely fall apart. If a token is generated from one context, like an API call, and then submitted from another, there's almost no way it's going to work. The downstream verification will reject it. The token just doesn't exist in isolation.
Think of these operational rules as your personal code review cheat sheet for Bubble. You really want to pay attention to polling cadence and retry budgets. Overpolling just adds a ton of noise. And infinite retries, they just hide real defects and aggressively burn through your account balance. The recommended setting here is to wait 15 seconds, then pull every 5 seconds with a 120-second cap. And definitely cap your retries at 3 attempts using exponential backoff. Doing this prevents those absolute disaster retry storms.
And this perfectly builds on what we were just talking about: separating API success from workflow success. An API returning a valid token is great, sure,
but it means absolutely nothing if the protected action still fails. You've got to continually track these two distinct outcomes. If your solves are successful but the workflow is failing, you probably have a session mismatch or an expired state. But if the solves are failing altogether, you need to go back and check your initial request inputs.
Finally, Part 5, Measuring True Success, Defending Your Integration with KPIs, and Troubleshooting.
When you're looking at your monitoring dashboards, you absolutely want to aim for a solver success rate of 95% or higher per CAPTCHA family. Hitting that target success rate is basically your proof that your inputs are correct and the solver is matching the live challenge. If that number dips, your inputs might be stale.
You also got to watch those latency targets. To put it in perspective, you want sub 25 seconds for token CAPTCHAs and under 8 seconds for image OCR. Tracking this first solve latency tells you instantly if your integration is perfectly healthy or if it's secretly getting caught in one of those infinite retry storms.
Look, things are inevitably going to break eventually. It's just reality. But when they do, a quick troubleshooting list solves roughly 90% of support tickets with simple, one-line fixes right there in your Bubble editor. Getting a wrong user key error? Just check for straight white spaces. Zero balance? Go top up the account. Getting a bad page URL error? Revalidate your inputs against the live HTML. And if your token is rejected after a successful solve, immediately go fix your session continuity.
So, I'm going to leave you with this one thought to chew on when evaluating your current Bubble integrations. Your API call succeeded, but did your workflow? Seriously, don't settle for the happy path illusion. Build for the harsh reality of production, not just the 5-minute demo. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy building.